The Stupidest Waste of Money Part 5. $10,000 for a doomsday bunker. My neighbor John has always believed in conspiracy theories and was afraid of the end of the world. In 2020, he completely lost his cool and started building a bunker in his basement. He spent money on all sorts of things: generators, canned goods, medical kits, even found an old water filter for $2,000. According to him, all this cost him $10,000. In 2023, John finally gave up on the doomsday theory, and now his bunker is just a room for storing unnecessary junk and expired canned goods. $3,200 for a mole control system that attracted raccoons. Our garden was being attacked by moles, and I decided it was time to take serious measures. I bought an ultrasonic system, which cost $3,200 and promised to rid us of all underground intruders. I installed it, but instead of moles, I attracted raccoons. They seemed not to be bothered by the ultrasound. They began to come every night, destroy my garden, and one day one even got inside the system, making a nest there. The moles, by the way, did not care, and their tunnels continued to appear. Eventually, the system had to be turned off, and now my garden has become just an open-air zoo. Every night I hear the raccoons having their parties, and sometimes I think they are laughing at me. A $20,000 wedding that lasted 3 months. I spent $20,000 on a wedding with my girlfriend, whom I had only known for a year and a half. We thought it was the love of my life. The wedding was lavish, with live music, flower arches, and tons of guests. Everyone said it was like a movie. 3 months after the wedding, we realized we were completely wrong for each other and got divorced. The ironic thing is that I'm still paying off the mortgage for the wedding, and I'm already living alone. $12,000 to restore an old car that became a never-ending project. After my dad passed away, I inherited his old 1967 Chevy Impala. It was his pride and joy, and I decided I would restore it as a tribute. I knew absolutely nothing about restoring cars, but I thought it would be fun and bring our whole family together. I spent $12,000 on parts and labor at various shops, but it turned out that the car still needed a lot of work. The problems were endless. The engine broke, the chassis needed replacing, and every time I thought I was close to finishing it, another breakdown would occur. My brother even came to help a few times, but after 2 failed attempts to put it back together, he said it was a waste of time. Now the car sits in the garage, and I feel guilty because I wanted to preserve my dad's memory, but instead I made it an unbearable financial burden. Bought a house for my mom for $250,000 and lost it all. My mom always dreamed of owning a house on the beach. We weren't rich, but when I got a good job and saved up some money, I decided I could make her dream come true. I found a small house on a lake in Ohio, not too expensive, $250,000, and took out a mortgage, hoping that we would go there on weekends, relax, and enjoy the views. My mom was happy for the first year, but then it turned out that the house had foundation problems. Water from the lake was slowly seeping into the basement, creating mold and wrecking the structure. Repairs would have cost another $50,000, but there was no money for it. In the end, we had to sell the house at a huge loss, barely covering the mortgage. My mom was devastated, and I felt like a complete failure because all this started with trying to make her happy. $9,000 for a spontaneous move to another state for a fresh start. At some point, my wife and I decided that we wanted to completely change our lives. It was the idea of a fresh start. New job, new city, new opportunities. We sold most of our belongings, rented a truck, and drove from Indiana to Colorado. It cost about $9,000. Rent, gas, first month's rent on the new place, a deposit. 2 months after the move, we realized that the new city was not at all what we imagined. There was little work, the rent was higher than expected, and the climate was harder on our health. We moved back, and all our dreams of a fresh start turned into lost money and severe disappointment. Now we sometimes joke that we already tried to escape and still came back, but inside we still have bitterness from that adventure. $3,500 for an antique doll that scared everyone in the house. My wife and I love antique things, and at one of the auctions I saw an antique porcelain doll from the early 1900s. She was wearing a snow-white dress, and her glass eyes looked so alive that I thought she would be a great addition to our interior. I paid $3,500, and when I brought her home, my children were immediately scared. The doll was really creepy. Every night, when I walked past the room where she stood, It seemed like her gaze was following me. Eventually, the doll was sent to the basement, and now everyone calls her our little horror. Every time someone goes down to the basement for tools, we start joking that we need to say hello to Miss Emily, and it has become our little family tradition, laughing and being afraid of her at the same time. $4,800 for a 10-minute fireworks show. My family always threw big 4th of July parties, and one year I decided I needed to do something really big. I contacted a professional fireworks company and paid $4,800 for the show. It lasted exactly 10 minutes, and I must admit, it looked amazing. We all looked up at the sky, and the neighbors came out to watch. But it was only after it was over that I realized that it was one of the shortest takeoffs of my money, literally. My kids now laugh and say, "Dad, remember how you burned our future presents in the sky?" $500 for a replica of the Game of Thrones throne. I was a huge fan of Game of Thrones, and once found a replica of the throne at a yard sale. A smaller version, of course. I thought it would be cool to have such a throne at home, and spent $500 on it. At first, it stood in my living room, and I even took pictures on it several times. But then I realized that it was terribly uncomfortable. The sharp swords cut into the skin, and just sitting on it was torture. Now this throne takes up space in the closet, and every time I remember with a smile how I thought it would be a great purchase. $400 for dog therapy. My dog, Toby, started showing signs of anxiety, chewing his shoes, howling when I left for work. I decided I had to help him, so I found a dog therapist for $400. The therapist came to our house, spent one session sitting on the floor and coaxing Toby to open up. She suggested a lot of weird techniques like the note from the owner. I had to write a letter to calm him down. After that, Toby seemed even more confused, and the session ended with him just lying down and falling asleep, ignoring all attempts by the therapist to talk to him. It was the most useless, but also the funniest experience of my life. Now, when Toby chews shoes, I sometimes say, "Do you just need another session?" $5,500 on a bird-safe laser that blinded everyone but the birds. We always had a lot of sparrows in our garden, which loved to ruin the crops in the beds. I decided to go the technological route and bought a bird-safe laser system for $5,500. They promised that the laser beams would scare away the birds by creating light lines, but without harming them. When I turned the system on, it turned out that it blinded us and our neighbors more than anything, and the birds simply ignored it. Every evening, the laser shone right into the windows, bothering us and even causing calls from neighbors asking to cover up this light. In the end, we had to turn it off, and now this bulky thing lies in the garage. The birds have returned and continue their feasts as if nothing has changed. $750 for a talking parrot that never spoke. Ever since I was a kid, I dreamed of having a parrot that could talk. I saw an ad for a talking parrot for sale for $750 and decided it was time to make my dream come true. When the parrot arrived, it turned out that the only thing he could do was whistle the same tune. I spent months trying to teach him to say at least something, playing him recordings, repeating the words myself, but nothing helped. He just whistled his tune, and sometimes it seemed he did it out of spite when I started saying something particularly important on the phone. Now my talking parrot has become just a decoration, and guests sometimes ask, "When will he say something new?" To which I can only smile sadly. $500 for fencing lessons for my friend and me that ended in the emergency room. I've always loved movies about knights and decided that fencing lessons were just what my friend and I needed to have some fun. We signed up for a class and paid $500 for a few lessons. First lesson was fun until we started training against each other. My friend, trying to block my lunge, accidentally hit my fingers. As a result, I ended up in the emergency room with a bandaged arm, and he with an injured shoulder. We decided that chivalry was not for us, and the lessons ended there. Now all we have left are photos in protective masks and gloves, which we sometimes show to our friends, telling about our nightly failure. $3,700 on a motorboat for a lake that had not enough water. We have a small lake at our dacha, and I decided that a motorboat was what it needed. I bought one for $3,700, and my family and I were ready for summer sailing. When we got to the dacha and tried to launch it, it turned out that the water level in the lake had dropped significantly due to the heat, and the boat was simply stuck at the bottom, unable to move. We tried to push it, but it did not help. In the end, my entire family ended up ankle-deep in mud, laughing and cursing my ideas. Now the boat sits on the shore, waiting for better water levels, which, it seems, will not appear for several years. $1,500 to train with a personal parkour trainer who left right away. I decided I would learn parkour to add some adrenaline to my life. I found a trainer, paid $1,500 for a few personal training sessions, and went to my first lesson. The trainer was young and cool. He would instantly jump up walls and show me how easy it was to overcome obstacles. When it was my turn, I gave it a try, but after a couple of unsuccessful attempts to hang onto the wall, I realized it just wasn't for me. After half an hour, the trainer, realizing that it wasn't going to work, suggested that I just relax and think about whether I needed this at all. In the end, he left, and that was the shortest lesson of my life. Now I try to just run around the park, going around obstacles rather than trying to overcome them. $3,000 on VIP tickets to a concert my friend got the date wrong. My friend is a big fan of a famous rock band, so I decided to surprise him for his birthday by buying him $3,000 VIP tickets so we could go to their concert in the best seats. The problem was that I trusted him to keep track of the date. On the day of the concert, we arrived at the stadium, but it turned out that we had mixed up the day. The concert was a day earlier. We stood in front of the closed doors, hearing the noise of a different band, and I realized that my money had gone down the drain, all because of a simple misunderstanding. Now, every time my friend sees concert posters, he first checks the date 10 times so as not to repeat this incident. $1,000 on a gaming chair that was so uncomfortable I went back to a stool. As a huge video game fan, I decided I needed the best gaming chair. Paid $1,000 for an ultra-ergonomic, vibrating, almost space-age chair. When it arrived and I sat in it, I realized it might not be for everyone. The headrest was too hard, the armrest kept pushing my arms in the wrong places, and the vibration itself, which kicked in during particularly intense moments of play, was more of a hindrance than a help. Within a week, my back was hurting so much that I went back to using a regular kitchen stool, and the chair now sits in the corner of the room. A reminder that sometimes expensive technology is best left to the professionals. $600 for an acupuncture class that ended in personal panic. I always thought that acupuncture was the perfect way to relax and rejuvenate. I signed up for an acupuncture class to learn how to insert needles on myself and paid $600. During the first class, the instructor demonstrated how to insert needles, and I decided to try it on myself. As soon as I inserted the first needle into my arm, I felt a slight tingling sensation and immediately panicked, thinking that something had gone wrong. A minute later, the instructor said that it was normal, but I had already decided that I would not do it anymore. Now all the needles are in a box, and I am returning to more traditional methods of relaxation, such as a regular massage. $10,000 to invest in the future Elon Musk, who disappeared with the money. I once met a young guy who was so convincing in his idea of a revolutionary electric scooter that I couldn't resist and invested $10,000 in a startup. He talked about how his scooter would change the personal transport industry, how he already had a couple of investors and even some patents. I was sure that this would be my ticket to the world of big business. But 6 months later, the guy simply disappeared. He didn't answer calls, and the office was closed. Later, it turned out that his project was a fiction, and he was just collecting money without any real developments. It was a bitter lesson that you shouldn't invest in someone just because he has a dream